I paid $3,500 to freeze dry 2 candies that transform from being chewy to crunchy, and you're gonna love it. You're gonna wanna watch this video. In this video, I'm gonna share with you 2 candies that take the least amount of time to freeze dry and are the most popular for me. They change from a chewy state to a crunchy state, and that's caramel M&Ms and your favorite Skittles. So I'm filming today in my garage. This is where everything started because I was a cottage food operator and I still have this freeze dryer. It's for my personal use and also testing different things. My family and I freeze dry a lot of fruits and vegetables, and sometimes we freeze dry candy because we have 2 little kids, and it's just great for food preservation and saving a lot of food waste. This is going to be a pretty easy video for candies because these are the 2 fastest freeze drying candies that I've found in terms of low labor to put together, and it takes the shortest amount of time to freeze dry in the dryer. So let's get to it. All right, let's get to the freeze dryer settings. So if you have version 23 or higher, you have the option to customize to candy mode, which just means you get to customize the drying amount of time and the dry temperature. So we press customize, and what we're going to do on caramel M&Ms and for Skittles, I'm going to do it at the same time. So we're going to go all the way up to 140 degrees. Only need about 2 hours to freeze dry these candies. So press save, we're going to press start, and that gives us 15 minutes to start prepping the candy. What I've got here is I've got 5 trays, and that's the amount for this large freeze dryer from Harvest Right. I've also got this silicone mat because what I'm going to do with caramel M&Ms is I'm going to put each caramel M&M into here. It actually ends up expanding, as you'll see after we get done with the cycle. I like having the individual caramel M&M in each one of these because it just allows for the caramel M&Ms not to stick together, because I'm going to do another tray for you to show you what it looks like when you just throw all of them on just like we do with Skittles, so that you can kind of compare the 2 and see which one you might like to do. So let's get to putting these into here. I usually just like dumping a bunch on the silicone mat, and then I'll just take them individually and put them into the different molds. So one thing, if you're not familiar with freeze drying, or you're not familiar with freeze drying candy with chocolate, is chocolate doesn't really freeze dry because there's not much moisture in it. So usually chocolate just ends up melting and you don't have that kind of changing texture. But with the caramel M&M, there's caramel inside and then the chocolate shell breaks apart. What I do once these break out and change their texture is I actually let these freeze. I either put them in the freezer or I let the chamber cool down after the cycle. It gets the chocolate kind of frozen, and that way when I store them into the bucket, there's not a bunch of melted chocolate in the bucket when I store these. As you can see here, the silicone molds provide a really good organization for all the individual caramel M&Ms. So now we're going to do a tray that doesn't have this mold. All right, so now we're going to do caramel M&Ms without the mold. When you have them this close together, they're going to clump up, and you just kind of have non-individual pieces for your bags, and in the customers, I feel like don't have like each individual caramel M&M to eat. So that's why I like having those molds, because now when I take them out of the tray and they're done, I have individual caramel M&Ms versus these are all going to stick together, which we'll show you. That was one bag of 34 ounces for caramel M&Ms. So that was 1 tray mold and then 1 just scattered all in the tray. So now we're going to do Skittles, and I want to show you 2 different packs that I've purchased when I go and buy Skittles. One is I buy the Skittles in these tubs. These are from Sam's Club, or if you have Costco, you can get these. Now the total ounces in this is 3 pounds, 6 ounces, which is a total net weight of 54 ounces. You can also buy, now although this is a wild berry bag, you can also buy these types of bags, and I buy them from a store that has wholesale. This has 50 ounces in it. And these bags right now locally for me, not the wild berry but original, is running about $10.98. They increased this past year, probably due to inflation. And then these Skittles at Costco were running about $9.78. They've got this seal on these tubs. We're going to dump the Skittles on this tray. I'm going to show you that this amount right here, a little bit too crowded. And the reason I know this for me personally is just like the caramel M&Ms, they just get a little bit too bunched up. I don't like having to break apart the Skittles after they're done freeze drying. And I don't like the clumps. As you can see with the tray that I just did, you can still see a little bit of the tray, but it's just a little bit too full in my opinion. We're gonna leave this tray as is. In fact, I'm gonna add a little bit more to it. I wanna just show you what it's like when you overfill the Skittles. Like right here, this is just a single layer. You might be like, well, I just like maximizing the tray. I don't like maximizing the tray to the point where they're all stuck together and maybe they're double layered. It just doesn't come out right. All right, so for this next tray, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do it my style, which I would recommend because they come out and then they're just a little bit more in individual pieces and there's less that you have to break apart. So this is just the right amount, and you might be like, well, what's the difference? Well, as you can see some of the silver tray. You're gonna have to kind of like eyeball it here, but I like this arrangement of the amount because when we get it out of the freeze dryer here soon, you're gonna see that they kind of are not as bunched up together. Some will be, but not as much, and that's what I like better than the one we just did. So we're gonna do one more tray, and then we're gonna start the cycle. Okay, all the trays are in the freeze dryer, but before we begin the cycle, I do want to invite you to watch a couple of my other videos. I just did a video on Bitto honey. That was a really fun video to do, and it's in one of my top 20 selling freeze-dried items to freeze dry. You can also see how I do Jolly Ranchers and a couple other fruits. So check out other videos on my channel. All right, that 15-minute waiting period is done. So all we're gonna press is this button. It turns to green and says the high temperature mode candy process is ready to go, and it's on. We're gonna close the drain valve and press continue. Hey, the two candies are done, and I told you it transforms them from a chewy candy into a crunchy candy. All right, so this is the caramel M&M. If you can see, the caramel pops and transform into a crunchiness, and then you have the chocolate shell out of that. It's so good. Let's give it a taste. Oh, so good. And I'll give you a special tip brought to you from my wife. Keep them refrigerated or frozen. They are fantastic. They're way better than keeping them at room temperature. Okay, so here are the two trays. As you can see, this one right here is the tray that was all clumped together. And the reason I said that I like using the silicone mat, or just the fact that there's just too many on here, is when you break it apart, it creates these bigger clumps, as you can see, and I just prefer having little bite sizes. So that's why with this tray with the silicone mats, you get a single individual caramel M&M, and you can put those in the bag. Now with these silicone mats, it's fairly easy to pop them out. They actually pop out right out of the little hole that they're in, and then you can put them in the bucket that you want. All right, and if you're not familiar with freeze-dried Skittles, Skittles pop and transform into this. This is the crunchy side of a Skittle. It's like eating popcorn, but Skittles. It's delicious. All right, the Skittles are done. Here's how the Skittles turned out. This was the tray that we put together that had a little bit of spacing in it. And as you can see, yes, they're clumped together, but they're not as deeply connected as you might think. So they easily kind of drop off and create individual Skittles just like you got out of the bag. Now this is the tray that we had very little spacing on. It's just very compact. You have to kind of break apart the bigger chunks of pieces to get those individual Skittles. If you look at this, it creates a whole big chunk. I don't like having these big chunks. I like having individual Skittles just like you're used to out of the bag. That's a wrap on this video. These are the two easiest candies you can do for your freeze-dried business. If you haven't tried the caramel M&Ms, please do. They're delicious. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't done it already, please subscribe to my channel if you're a freeze-dried business owner, or if you just like to follow this freeze-dried craze. I'd love for you to join the community. Hey, welcome to the Freeze-Dried Business Channel. Have you been an airhead when it comes to freeze-drying airheads? Well, I have too. I'm gonna try the airheads for the first time, and so you're gonna see me set the freeze dryer to what I think is gonna work, as well as arranging it on the tray. I'm also gonna cut some of them, and we're gonna see what airheads do in the freeze dryer, as well as how we can make it work. Let's get started. Hey, Hey, welcome to another video on the Freeze Dry Business channel. My name is David. I run a freeze dry business in Idaho. I've been running my business for several years and I've learned a lot of different things about freeze drying as a business. Now, a lot of things are different for every different state that you're a part of, but there are a lot of things that remain the same within a freeze dry business. So a lot of my videos are to share those generalities and some of the specifics. I can help you if you comment in my videos or you send me an email in my About section on my YouTube channel. Now, today we're going to be doing airheads, and I haven't done them before, but I wanted to try them and I think they're really fun. I don't like adding a whole lot of new candies to my product lineup within my business because I've already got a lot of candies and it's just a lot to store and to do. But I've been wanting to try this because there's a lot of new ways to do freeze drying candy that I've been seeing, where you're warming the trays, you're also going at a very high temperature for longer periods of time to make certain things work. And I just want to try something new. So what you can expect in this video is I'm going to set up the freeze dryer settings. You're going to see that. You're also going to see me arrange them on the trays. I am going to cut them because if I was to sell the airhead, I kind of like having bite-sized pieces because when you put them in the bag for sale, they just look like there's more in it. And that's the way we all are within as consumers, is if we see that there's more, we might actually buy more. And that's just for my style of bagging and my style of marketing. I just want to be able to have more bite-sized pieces. So before we get started, let's go ahead and set the freeze dryer. Now, hey, I already did a candy batch. So what you can do on the freeze dryer is you can hit the button that says Start New Candy Batch. That's what I'm going to do. And that basically starts a new candy batch at the same temperature that you had previously, which I did at 150 degrees for a different type of candy, which is the lemon heads. Go ahead and check out that video. I've got all the trays out. We're gonna put the airheads on the trays and then we're gonna put them in at 150 degrees. Now, hey, I know a lot of you sometimes have the earlier version of the Harvest Right software and you don't have the option for candy mode, but you do have the option within that same old software to set the dry temperature. So before the machine starts, you need to go into the custom settings, change the temperature to about 140, maybe even 150 degrees, and then start the machine. Now, to bypass all of the freezing cycle and the vacuum pressure and all that type of thing that you normally would do with a full cycle, with fruit, other types of foods, is you're just going to start the machine, and then once it starts kicking on freezing, you're going to say cancel, and then it's going to bring you to the screen that says, hey, do you want to add more final dry, or do you want to defrost or not defrost? What you're going to choose is add more final dry time. And basically, all you're going to do is kick it into the final dry at that high temperature that you already set. So that's for the people that have the older software. Those who have the new software, you've got candy mode. And really all you're going to do is you're going to press customize before the machine starts. You're going to change that temp to 150, 140 degrees. And you're also going to change the dry time to whatever you want. I have it set at 5 hours right now because I did the lemon heads. So I'm just going to keep it at that, and then I might change it to lower or higher based on what the end result is. All right, so we've got all the different airheads. I bought these in bulk, and it was about $2.78 per pound. Now, I buy a lot of my candy on Amazon, but I also buy at a wholesale store called Winco that's here in Idaho. What I'm going to do with these airheads is I'm going to unwrap them, but I'm also going to use this knife. I don't normally have this small of a knife to cut, but I forgot my larger knife when I started this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly unwrap these airheads very quickly, and that is the tedious part about freeze drying. You have to kind of find really quick, fast ways to unwrap candies because most candies are wrapped in some type of wrapper and you just kind of have to unwrap it. So there's sometimes just not an easy way to unwrap these. The purposes of this video, I am just going to unwrap just a few of these, and we're going to cut them and put them on one tray. And I'm also going to do whole airheads just to see what the difference is of how they expand. By the way, if you are new to freeze drying or you haven't connected yourself to some of these Facebook forums, there is really a lot that has already been done and everyone's kind of figured out things. Now, it's not really trade secrets because sooner or later somebody's going to know how to do airheads and set the right settings and all that type of stuff. I share a lot of my knowledge because I just couldn't find a lot of video information online when I started my business 3 years ago in 2020, and I just felt like people needed to see what was actually going on in this freeze drying business world.
and I wanted to make high quality videos, and I appreciate every single one of you who has subscribed, as well as those who have commented. Now, all right, so I've got these full-size ones. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these in half, and we're just going to see how the halves go. Hopefully you can see that. I'm just cutting each one in half, trying to be as equal as possible. If you're in hot, humid space, make sure you're keeping your candy in a room temperature area or in your house or some type of temperature controlled area, because this candy can get really soft and it's going to make it even more and more impossible to get these candy wrappers off when they're sticking to the wrapper because they're warm. And so that's what my tip would be for you. So as you can see, I'm just putting the halves on the tray. All right, so these were in half, so we're gonna keep these halves for the Airheads in this type of space just to see what happens, and we'll put it in the freeze dryer. All right, now let's go ahead and do the Airheads, but let's do them completely whole and see what happens. So I'm just gonna unwrap some of these. I'll put it on a time lapse. All right, we've got 15 full-size Airheads, so let's go ahead and put this in the freeze dryer. All right, so the trays are in for the Airheads. Now again, what I set the temperature to was 150 degrees because I just started a new candy batch. It's already in candy mode previously from the lemon heads that I just did. Now I've already done a candy batch like I said, so what we're gonna do is we've already closed the drain valve. The high temperature candy process is on. We're gonna press continue. And what we're gonna do on Airheads, because they're already soft, they're not like the hard candies, like the lemon heads, is we're gonna actually skip the tray warming and it's just gonna start drying the candy. And we've got the drying time now at 5 hours. Now this is the evening time, so I'm gonna go ahead and let this run. Let's do 8 hours, and that way I can come back in the morning and see how it does. I normally would probably do this at 3 hours just so I can keep doing candies, but we'll just keep it at the 8 hour and 29 mark. All right, the cycle is complete that we have the Airheads in. Let's go ahead and take a look to see what happens when you freeze dry Airheads. All right, here's the Airheads that we cut in half. Wow, they puffed up a little bit. This has a little bit of a puff to it. We're gonna see how they taste in a second. This is the ones that we left whole for the Airheads. And this is what happens to Airheads if you put them into third. All right, so let's just look at the size of what we did here. So we had the full size, this is cut in half, and this is in thirds. So really not much of a difference in the halves and the thirds, but definitely on the full size. Now, all of these were the 3 different trays that we did. Those were the thirds, wholes, and halves. So let's go do a taste test. All right, here's the taste test with the full size Airhead. All right, the texture is definitely crunchy. I really like this. The flavor hits kind of almost after the full bite in your mouth. Actually, this is really tasty. I really like this. Now that's the full size, and then this is the half size. All right, nothing really changes on the taste. Wow, lots of sugar. That's why I don't do a whole lot of candies added on to my product line. All right, after freeze drying these Airheads, here's a couple of conclusions that I have. One, you don't need to cut the Airheads. I thought you needed to because you would have more bite-sized pieces, but looking at the full size, it really didn't puff up that much that I could still fit quite a few in a single bag of the 5.5 by 8 size bags that I use. So I don't think you need to really cut these. But if you were to cut these, I think it would create a lot more bite-sized pieces in these squares. You'd probably see in the window bags, you'd probably see a lot more different flavors and colors, which always brings out a good amount of marketing and brand for the product that someone is going to buy because they don't really know what to expect. Now, as far as Airheads go for the cost, that's something you got to figure out. I still would probably stick with my $2 per net ounce, or probably stick with my $8 to $9 per bag price for the Airheads. Now, just to recap on the freeze dryer settings, we did the Airheads at 150 degrees, and we did not warm the trays. So these performed fine at 150 degrees. I almost think you could go down 140 and not even have to warm the trays either. Now, we did run it for about 8 hours because it was overnight, but I don't think you need to do that either. I'd probably run Airheads for about 3 to 4 hours, and they'll probably puff up fine. If they don't and you taste test and they're still a little bit chewy, just run them a little bit longer. Hey, thanks for watching another video on the Freeze Dry Business channel. I hope this information was helpful. If you like this video, hit the like button. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. Hey, make a difference in your community using your Freeze Dry business. We'll see you next time on the Freeze Dry Business channel. Hey, welcome to the Freeze Dry Business channel. Have you ever wondered why certain candies that have chocolate in it just don't freeze dry well? In today's video, I'm going to share with you a candy that does have chocolate in it and it does freeze dry well, and it is one of my top sellers for my Freeze Dry business, and you should add it too. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to the Freeze Dry Business channel. My name is David. I run a freeze dry business in Idaho. If you're running a freeze dry business or you want to start one, this channel's for you. I'm trying to connect the freeze dry business community with the tools and resources needed to grow a sustainable business, and that's what these videos are all about. Now, I've been absent for a couple of weeks. Reason being, I do have a full-time job on top of this side hustle business that I'm trying to grow, and so sometimes that just gets in the way of video production and things that I need to get done. In today's video, we're going to be doing Charleston chews. This is one of my top 20 selling freeze-dried items that I have. If you want to check out that video, it's on my channel. Usually chocolate doesn't freeze dry well. It doesn't have much moisture, so really it just ends up melting. But like caramel M&Ms and Milk Duds, the caramel that is inside the chocolate, when you freeze dry it, that actually allows it to have kind of that popping texture, and then you are able to maybe like put it into the freezer and that candy is able to harden up and the chocolate doesn't melt right away. Now, if you're not familiar with the Charleston chew, this is one of the more expensive type of candies that you're going to purchase because they don't sell these in bulk like they do at other types of stores like Costco and things like that. So you're really going to have to go onto Amazon. I've got a link in the description to buy Charleston chew. Now, this is a 30-ounce bag. It has about 120 of the Charleston chews in these little wrappers. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to kind of quickly unwrap it as best as I can. I'll cut it for you. I'll show the different sizes that I cut them in. Up until this video, I've only done this size of the Charleston chews with the wrappers, but I found that through some of the forums, a lot of people are liking these Charleston chews rollers because they're just little balls and you can put them on the tray. There's no unwrapping or anything of that type of nature. So I'm going to do in this video both the rollers for the first time, and then I'm also going to do the Charleston chews with the wrappers. So let's talk about the freeze dryer settings. I usually don't change up the temperatures too much above 140 degrees or so. So I'm going to press customize because I've got the latest software with Candy Mode. I'm going to increase the drying temperature to 140, and then I'm going to do the extra dry time. That's the time that it's actually going to do the freeze drying for the candy. I'm going to set it to 3 hours this time. Now, here's the hint about Charleston chews. It does have chocolate in it. So if you take it out too early when it's at that 140 degrees or even around 100 degrees, once it's finished with its cycle, you're going to still have it be melty, and it's going to have probability of it melting with it in your bucket and in your bags. So what I found best with Charleston chews is I leave it in the freeze dryer, or I take it out and put it in the freezer, all the trays, and let it freeze over, and then I store it in my buckets or immediately bag it. So that's my tip for you, is don't take it out immediately, and if you do, put it in the freezer, all those trays, so that the chocolate hardens up and then you have an intact Charleston chews, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so for the prep tools and everything that you're going to need for Charleston chews is really simple. All I've got is a knife because we're going to take the wrappers and we're going to cut those. So what I'm going to do for these rollers for the first time is I knew that they came in little balls. So rather than pour them all on the tray and have them scatter about on the tray and have them all maybe touch, is I'm going to put them all in these different molds. This is the Harvest Right tray molds that you can buy on the website. I've got a link in the description of this video if you want to buy these molds. So I got every single ball on one tray with the tray molds. That's pretty nifty. I had 3 left. All right, so now we're going to do the Charleston chews that have wrappers on them. Now I'm going to put gloves on. The chocolate and everything just gets sticky over time, and it ends up just getting a mess on my hand. I did pre-freeze, and I put my Charleston chews bags in the freezer. Now the reason being is because over time that I've done this, if it's at room temperature or whatever, it just adds a little bit more of the stickiness to the wrapper. So when you freeze it though, I found that the wrappers come apart more easily. And again, it's about speed and efficiency when it comes to freeze drying as a business and cutting these candies. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these in half, and then I'm also going to cut them in thirds, because there's just different types of bite-sized pieces that you want to choose for your customers. With different candies in your freeze-dried business, the reason we're cutting them in different sizes is because if you were going to create your own candies, you wouldn't want them to be just gigantic, right? I mean, the Jolly Ranchers are really fun if you do them in their full size, but it's not manageable to put them into a bag to sell. So that's why we're going to do more of the smaller pieces, and we're going to make them more bite-sized. I'm going to unwrap all of these Charleston chews, and then I'm going to put the chocolate on here that's unwrapped, and then we'll arrange it on the tray so you can kind of see how many you can put on the tray. As you can see here, I'm literally pushing up and it gets out the chocolate without it sticking. And again, you saw that it didn't stick to this wrapper, and that's because I pre-froze it. This is the tedious part about freeze drying as a business, especially if you're going to do candy like this. It's a lot of fun freeze drying, but it does take time to prepare all of this candy. You have to cut it, you have to arrange it. It just takes time. Now, is it worth it? Absolutely. Because if you're doing it as a side hustle, hey, you don't have huge amounts of overhead. You can kind of price the way you want to. But as soon as you start getting into wholesale and you have people asking for bulk items, things like that, you got to figure out your margins. You got to figure out how much time you're going to dedicate to doing stuff like this. And I only do these Charleston chews really maybe once a month, and I just do a couple of these bags like you're seeing here. Okay, so let's take a look at this tray and let's see what the arrangement is. Okay, so we've got 6, and then let's calculate how much we got down in another row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 6 times 12, I'm not a math whiz, but it is 72. So we've got 72 half pieces in here. So that's 36 individual Charleston chews that we cut. So you need to have 36 on here. Let's do 120, because that's 120 in the bag, divided by 36 is 3. So we can actually do 3 trays, 3 1/4 trays of Charleston chews out of 120 count, plus we've already got the one in the rollers. So for the purposes of this video, I just wanted to show you the arrangement of this. Now do them cut in thirds. Okay, cool. So let's count these up right now. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 7 right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Gonna get my handy calculator out on my phone. 13 times 7. So we got 91 pieces on here. 91 divided by 3. Again, 30 pieces that we did here. All right, so we've got 3 trays in the freeze dryer. So now I'm going to do the next 2 off camera, and then we'll check the freeze dryer once it's all done. All right, the Charleston chews are done. Now what I did is I actually ran this overnight, so I let it chill all the way down to about -20 degrees. And so I'm just warming the trays. I'm not going to warm it very much. I'm just going to warm it to about maybe 0 degrees or so, just so it's not super cold when I take it out of the freeze dryer. And then we'll take a look at the finished product. All right, let's take a look at the Charleston chews. This is what I love about this Charleston chews. Now look at this, this puffs up. This was the cut in half size. As you can see, the chocolate, once you freeze it, it actually doesn't melt and things. So that's why I say you gotta make sure you freeze it either in the freezer or just let the freeze dryer freeze it back. Let's see what these Charleston chews rollers did. Wow, that's awesome. Look at that. Yeah, basically turned out about the same size as some of the thirds that we did for the Charleston chews. So awesome, let's take it out. Now this is what's so great about the Charleston chews is the texture has changed. The chocolate is now not melted. It's all around the marshmallowy type of candy. It literally is just like a vanilla marshmallowy like Whopper. That's how I would describe it. Now I chose to do these molds because with the rollers I just didn't want it rolling around and then touching each individual piece. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of pop these out and I'm just gonna put them back on the tray. As I'm seeing right here, and I don't know if you can see this from the angle here, I'll zoom in a little bit. It's definitely kind of creating a little bit of breakage, if that's even a word. So it's kind of popping out as I'm popping out the silicone mold here. So it's definitely kind of crumbling the Charleston chews. Not really liking this. So you're kind of seeing this for the first time. So my thought process of like, you know, hey, making this individual, it may not have been the best idea. I'm not really liking, to be honest, because it's just taking more time for me to get these open. And what I would recommend based on this first experience, because this is the first time that I did the Charleston chews rollers, I would not use these mats because I don't like how it's kind of crumbling the product, and therefore I'm not going to package it because it just doesn't look right. Hey, thanks for watching another video. I'll keep it short and sweet. Hit the like button if you like the content from this video and it helped you understand how to do Charleston chews. And if you want to join the community of freeze-dry business owners, I'd love for you to subscribe. Freeze-drying Starburst has been a tricky candy to freeze-dry for a lot of us who own freeze-drying businesses, but I got it to work and I'm going to show you how I did it in this video. The Starburst candy has been a little bit tricky and inconsistent for a lot of people who have tried freeze-drying Starburst. And the reason being is because even if you freeze dry the Starburst like any normal candy like Skittles or Taffy, things like that, and you just put it into the freeze dryer at a high temperature, it just doesn't pop and it becomes too hard and too crunchy, and it just doesn't really change the airy texture that we all know and love and why freeze-dried candy has been so popular. Now there's two methods to do freeze-dried Starburst. There's either using just the freeze dryer settings alone. If you have a Harvest Right freeze dryer or other freeze dryers, you just put it to a high temperature mode and freeze dry it for 2 to 3 hours. Now the other method is to not use the freeze dryer settings to soften up the candies, because candy mode on the Harvest Right freeze dryers only goes up to 150 degrees. So you're going to need to use an oven to get it to soften up enough to where it's almost kind of melting, and then transfer all the candies in the trays to the freeze dryer at that 150 degrees. And then it becomes a lot more airy and crunchy and actually becomes a better freeze-dried Starburst candy. I'm not going to bore you with unwrapping every single individual Starburst and having you watch that, but I am just going to show you what bag I'm using. This is a 3-pound bag that I bought in bulk from a wholesale type of store, and so you could buy these probably at Costco or any type of wholesale distributor. I'm going to see how long this takes to unwrap, and that way you have a good idea of what the labor looks like going into freeze-drying Starburst as a candy for your business. All right, I finished unwrapping the Starburst, and this is 65 individual Starburst. 8 minutes to unwrap 65 Starburst. Now you take 8 times the 5 trays, that's 40 minutes of labor just unwrapping all these Starbursts. This is pretty tedious, I'm not gonna lie. These little candies with the wrapper, it's really not that easy to unwrap. You have to peel it apart. Even if I had gloves on at my commercial kitchen, you know, it just wouldn't be very fast and effective. And so just thinking about that, I have to do 5 more trays after this. It might be worth it to you if, you know, you have your kids or you have family or friends or even workers that this is literally what they do on a downtime and just watch Netflix or watch a movie or something like that. But there's not really any easy way to do this other than maybe buying the freeze-dried Starburst minis. Those ones I know you can just kind of open the bag and toss in there. There's no wrapper. So that might be the better option than doing these larger Starbursts. But let's go ahead and put this into the freeze dryer and then we'll see what it turns out with the freeze drying process. Now, if you're not a subscriber already, hit the subscribe bell and you'll be notified of new videos that I come out with about freeze drying as a business. There's other ways to connect too. You can go to freezedrybusiness.com. The link is in the channel description as well as this video description. And I've been building my website out so that I can provide more and more value and content for you related to freeze drying. I've also got a weekly newsletter that you can subscribe to that I'll be coming out to bring you more and more value for the freeze drying business community. All right, so if you have a Harvest Right freeze dryer, this is what the screen looks like right now. And what you can do is you can put it in candy mode if you have the version 5.0 or higher. So what we're going to do is we're going to press this customize button where you get this menu here and it says dry mode fast. We want to keep that there. And to reach candy mode, you literally are just going to go over to the dry temp and you're going to increase it to 135 degrees. And then it populates and says you're at the candy high mode temperature, which is perfect. Now for Starburst, I'm going to go up to 150 degrees, which is the max that you can go up to. And then what I'm going to do on the dry time is I'm going to just go to 3 hours, and I think that that is going to give me enough time to see whether it's going to melt and make it soft. All right, so now that we've got it saved, we're going to press start, and that's going to start the freeze dryer to cool the vacuum chamber for 15 minutes, and then after that 15 minutes, then we can hit the candy mode option, and then we can start the freeze dryer to warm the trays. I'm calling an audible right now since I'm in my home on this video, and because I'm in my home and because I want to see what the differences are between using an oven and the freeze dryer, I'm going to put this tray with a couple of these Starbursts into the oven at 200 degrees and soften them up, and I'm going to do 15 minutes of 200-degree tray warming in the oven for this tray. And so once we reach that 15-minute mark, I'm going to transfer this tray into the freeze dryer, and that way there's about 5 minutes left of tray warming. Then it's going to kick on the candy mode, and we're going to see what freeze drying Starburst all turns out from doing the freeze dryer settings and just doing it from the oven, transferring it to the freeze dryer. I'm excited. I feel like a Peyton Manning right now calling an audible. So I'm glad I am doing this, and I'm glad we're gonna see which one actually makes the best freeze-dried candy using different methods. So let's see how it all turns out. So once it's done with the preheating and it hits 200 degrees, I'm gonna make sure that I hit my phone for 10 minutes on 200, and then we'll get the tray out and transfer it over to the freeze dryer. All right, so it's already starting to melt. As you can see, I'm gonna open this up. See how it's already melting? So I don't even know if we really need to do much longer. All right, so I'm gonna take this out. I'm actually gonna put this one in the freeze dryer right now, but I'm gonna do another tray, and I'm gonna do it for maybe like a minute and see if it softens it up just a little bit more so it's not just puddles like this. And that way we can see what types of time frame in the oven actually compares to how much it softens it up. All right, now that we know that 200 degrees softens it up really fast and it creates more puddles, I don't want it to be more flat. I want it to be kind of stayed intact to these types of shapes. So I'm gonna see maybe 30 seconds to a minute of 200 degrees does in the oven, and then pull it out and put it into the freeze dryer. All right, so let's set a timer and actually see how long it takes for these to soften up, just standing right here. All right, it's been about 2 minutes now, so I'm gonna open this up and see if I can just check with my finger on how soft it is. All right, it's definitely getting a little bit softer. I kind of like that. See how I'm squishing it? I don't know if you can see that. I'm squishing in. I'm gonna leave it in there for maybe another minute now. It's been 2.5 minutes. So I'm gonna see what another minute entails. All right, it's been a minute. Now that's 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm gonna take these out and put it in the freeze dryer, and then we'll see how those trays compare for the ones that kind of flatten out as a puddle, that we ran it a little bit too long, I think, and then what these will look like because they still have the kind of intact Starburst square look. So 3 minutes and 45 seconds actually. Stop the clock, and let's put it in the freeze dryer. Hey, as we wait for the Starburst to freeze dry, I want to invite you to take a look at the video description below, where I've included several other videos about freeze drying candy, freeze drying fruit, other aspects of freeze drying as a business. If you're just starting out and you're wondering what type of freeze dryer to buy, you can take a look at my video below about the Harvest Right freeze dryers. I've owned this freeze dryer since I started my freeze drying business, and I really like their support, their machines, the different sizes, and they always have great specials. And I'm a big fan of Harvest Right. I'm also an affiliate of them, so if you use the link below, it all goes back to supporting this channel and making sure that I'm providing more and more content for you. So I appreciate any of the referrals. All right, let's get back to the freeze dryer and see how the Starburst turned out. All right, freeze drying process is done. Let's go ahead and take these bad boys out. Looks like it turned out great. All right, here is the freeze dried Starburst. Look how this turned out. Puffed out perfectly. I'm actually really surprised because I really didn't know what to expect. I expected some of them to pop and some of them not to. But man, look at this. So this is the tray that we did not use the oven to do, but we just warmed the trays for 15 minutes at 150 degrees. and then ran it for 2.5 to 3 hours at 150. Look at that. Now we're gonna do a taste test and see how that is, but let's just take one like this and let's see how it crunches. Wow, that's awesome. That's super crunchy, a lot better than the ones that I've tried that made the mistake of. Okay, now here's this particular tray. Now this one we did at 200 degrees in the oven, but we only did it for about 3.5 minutes or so, if you recall. And this is the one that crunched up, so look how big these turned out. And wow, so that crunched up into a powder, kind of like a Jolly Rancher. That's awesome. And this was the tray that we did at 200 degrees for about 5 minutes, but then I realized it was turning into a saucer, and so I took it out immediately. But look at this. This is awesome. These definitely are super crunchy. We'll do a taste test of these. But this kind of makes me think that maybe we should cut these up into either halves or quarters, and then they turn out to be a little bit smaller so we can put them in bags. All right, we got to do a taste test. Now I'm going to do the ones that we did just with the freeze dryer settings. I'm going to do the taste test on these ones right here. It's the same type of texture that you're going to get like from a Jolly Rancher. This is awesome. Wow, I'm so glad I actually tried Starburst again. This is the one that we softened up at 200 degrees in the oven and then stuck it in the freeze dryer at 150 degrees. Oh my gosh, that is really good. That is so much more airy and delicate too. Wow. Wow, I'm super tickled that the Starburst actually worked. I'm really surprised, but I'm also really thankful that I tried this again. It goes to show that you just got to keep experimenting with your freeze dryer. Today we're going to be doing a how-to video on candy, and one of the most popular candies, and I think it's probably one of the better ones to do, is Taffy. I run a freeze-dried foods business in Idaho, and I produce this channel for more and more people that are getting into the freeze-dried foods business. So whether you're currently running one or you're just getting started, a lot of my videos are here to help you. Saltwater Taffy changes its texture. Got a picture of what it looks like once it's freeze-dried. It changes its texture from a chewy candy to a textured, like malty ball that the flavor hits you immediately. So it's really popular. There's a couple of pros to doing Taffy. One is the texture changes to something that's new and visually appealing to your customers. So the experience for them is going to be new and fresh. So it changes from its chewy state to a more malty ball state. So the flavor hits you immediately. Now the cons, as I'm going to show you, is a little bit more time consuming, but I'm going to show you today the process that I do for cutting. There's different methods that I've seen using scissors as well as a knife, and I'll show you why it's so tedious to do taffy. Now, although you can find local places to get taffy, I do find that there's some quick ways to get them online. One is Amazon, 2 Taffy Town, as well as CandyNation.com. These 3 places vary on price and shipping time frame, so it's going to be up to you on what you would like to choose. I haven't noticed too lack of quality in all 3 of those, and they have different flavors available. So go ahead and look those 3 up. I've included a link in the description of all these 3 places where you can find the taffy. Now there's a wide variety of flavors that you can choose from. My suggestion to you is to select a few, try them out in sales from your local farmers markets or maybe online, whatever your channels are for sales, and look to see what your customers are buying the most of, and then just continue doing those flavors. Some of the more popular ones that have been successful for me is huckleberry taffy, peppermint, watermelon, blue raspberry. And I haven't tried cotton candy, but I've heard from a lot of the freeze-dried forums that cotton candy has been phenomenally popular, so you might want to try that. Another option to include different flavors might be to have a different flavor of the week or the flavor of the month. That might be a great marketing strategy for you, is to change it up every single month and then provide different type of flavors so that you can gauge the interest of your customers. All right, so for the settings for the freeze dryer before we start cutting the taffy is you want to set it to candy mode. It's very simple with the new software. So you're going to select the customize button, and then you're going to turn up the temperature to 140 degrees. That's the temperature that I've been using the most. This changes to dry mode to fast. You're going to save, and then you're simply going to start it. And see how it says high temperature mode? That's candy mode. You're going to simply press start. And now it's going to cool a chamber. I don't really know why it cools the chamber because we're going to be using the heat, but that accomplishes what we need for prepping the freeze dryer. So what should we use to cut taffy? Well, there's two cutting methods that I think have been working the best for me, as well as I've found through research of other forums that have worked well for other people. There's really no easy way to do this except for using a knife. I've got a knife sharpener so that we have a really nice blade and cut. And then also these is Cutco scissors. I really like these. They're durable and they really cut well and really make sure that you're getting a good cut each and every time. So now we're ready to cut and get the taffy on the tray. Now I've got a large freeze dryer, so this is a large freeze dryer tray, but whether you have a small or a medium or a large, the same process and technique and cutting can be applied. You just need to figure out the arrangement that would fit on the trays for you. I cut the taffy into quarters and I can put 7 across and then I go 16 down all the way down here. That's 112 individual pieces. That way the taffy doesn't touch to each other and it creates a perfect circle ball once it's freeze dried. Now through my process as well, I've counted the number of pieces that can fit on the tray. So like I said, it was 112. That means I could put 28 pieces of taffy on this tray. You could probably fit more. It just depends on what you'd like to have as the finished product. I like having them come out with any imperfections so that it's a perfect circle and it doesn't look like it was touching any of the other taffy. The reason it takes so long is you have to unwrap every single one. It does not work, I've found, if you leave the wrapper on and then put them onto the freeze dryer tray, and cutting, you can't really cut it that well. So I have found that if you have the taffy hard already, maybe it's coming from a controlled environment where it's not impacted by heat, or maybe it's coming from the freezer, you can cut it down the middle and then the wrappers actually come out. So I've unwrapped these with my fingers. Let me show you how it is if I cut it with the wrapper on with the knife. Okay, cuts down there, and then you kind of like pinch with your fingers and it pops out of the wrappers. Now that could be just as effective as you want it to be, but I have found that just simply unwrapping all of them and then cutting can be a little bit faster, just depending on the temperature of the taffy, because the stickier the taffy, the less likely it's going to pop out of the wrapper once you cut it. Now taffy is popular, I'm finding. I actually posted in one of the Facebook forums for freeze-dried candy makers about taffy because I was headed to an event and I just never really saw much sales from taffy. And people just said, you know, you need to have samples. People need to try it. And believe me, once I had that holiday event and I had people sample the taffy, that was my top seller. So I think over time, just like freeze-dried Skittles, people are going to be more and more in tune with what freeze-dried taffy looks like and also tastes like. So then I think it'll actually sell a lot better even this coming year. As you can see, it does get kind of messy. I'm going to show you the camera kind of down here too. Like, I've done this before in my kitchen table when I was in cottage food and things, and it just gets super messy, it's sticky, and you have to use a scraper to kind of clean it up. So it does get a little bit messy, so that just be aware of that. You can cut these in half, you can cut them in quarters, it's totally up to you. But I am going to cut some that are in half just so you can see what the size difference is like once we get done with the cycle, and I'll show you that. There's really no easy way about going about this. This is what everybody's doing. I've actually tried to find taffy in bulk where I don't have to unwrap it. It's not the case. Can't find it. So you do have to cut these all with a knife. All right, so we're done with cutting all of these, all the taffy sizes, and these are cut in quarter. All right, so let's use the scissors. These are Cutco scissors, and see how it does with these. Now, if these were soft, I think it'd be a totally different story, because the taffy's hard, you know, I'm not cutting or squeezing this super hard because I just don't want them to fly everywhere. As you can see, I am putting a lot of pressure, but that's cutting it in quarters and they're flying all over the place. So you know what? I'm not even going to do these very much with the scissors. I'm going to use the knife to do the rest of these. So I would say for future use, if you're going to use these Cutco scissors, make sure your taffy is a little bit more soft, and I'm sure these would actually be better than the knife because it wouldn't stick to the knife. It'd actually be really good with these scissors. Now, if they're cold, then I would use the knife. So let's go ahead and do the rest of these, and I'll put it on a time lapse real quick. So now for the arrangement, we're going to arrange the taffy so that you can see exactly how I arrange it on the tray. I'll do 7 as a row, and then I'm going to do 16 columns all the way down with all these taffy. I'm done doing all the arrangement, and it turned out to be 13 rows of the taffy just because I arranged it basically on quarters and with it halves. If I just did it on quarters, I'd be able to do 16 because it's a little bit closer and they're smaller. All right, let's put it in the freeze dryer. The cycle is done. Let's take a look to see what taffy does when you put it in the freeze dryer. All right, let's take a look and see what the saltwater taffy looks like freeze dried. It turns into this egg shape. If you take a look, huckleberry taffy looks like this. And we got the blue raspberry. These were quartered, if you remember. And these were cut in half, so a little bit bigger. Now the reason this makes a difference is, one, you can probably fit more of the quarter pieces in a bag that you're using versus halves. So I like cutting it in quarters, but these all look great. Hey, why don't we try some freeze-dried saltwater taffy? So here's the blue raspberry. See how the texture changes? Now it's super malty. The flavor hits immediately. This is really a big hit. So when you're doing freeze drying as a business, you want to ensure that you have proper storage for your freeze dried candy. I found that these 5-gallon buckets right here have worked really well. And what they have is it has a lid that actually creates a great seal around it, if you can see. It's rubber, has a rubber gasket, and when you close it up, it spins and becomes airtight in here. So with freeze drying candy, normally it's really a short shelf life. So I don't really do a whole lot of candy building up in terms of inventory and stocking up in these buckets. I use this for short-term storage. So let's put some product into this bucket so you can see what that looks like. All right, so we're gonna unseal the bucket, get that lid off. So for trays, when you're doing just very little or you want to store a smaller amount of candy, what I like to buy is these hefty jumbo bags. They're 2.5 gallons and they really do well with all the candy, and sometimes just temporarily getting these bagged up, and then I eventually put them into the storage containers. So let's go ahead and put some of the other flavored taffy in these bags. So we've got our blue raspberry, and I slide it just right into the bag. And what's great about, you don't need to use the silicone mats for the taffy. They slide right off as soon as they're dry. Peppermint. And let me just slide all the peppermint into there. Perfect. A couple left over that we got to eat, duh. All right, so now that we've got the freeze-dried taffy stored up in the bags and the bucket, I'm going to show you how to package it. Now, I'm only going to do 1 tray's worth of packaging just so we can see how many bags we get out of the product. Remember, we took 28 individual taffy wrappers and we cut those onto a tray. So I'm going to put them into the bags that I use. I don't have them stamped or labeled, but I'm just going to show you that I use these craft bags that are food safe, but they have a window. They're for short-term use. I don't market them as long-term storage. Now the reason being is because with the window, it is susceptible to more oxygen coming in, and also it is susceptible to heat. And taffy I've seen really go bad, meaning it just shrivels up and goes back to more of a liquid, sticky gooiness within a couple of weeks. So you want to make sure you're mindful of that when the heat comes around in the summertime. Now, I really like these bags. I've used them a lot. You can find the link in the description for these bags on Amazon.com. So let's go ahead and package them up and let's see how much product we get out of this. So I've got a food scale here to weigh the net ounces. I usually put about 1.5 to 2 ounces of product in this. Okay, it's zeroed out. It's about 0.3 ounces. And then we're gonna do the blue taffy. I normally have my label on the front and on the back for the ingredients. You just use the ingredients from the taffy that you bought. Now that's 1.3, 1.5, there we go. So now these are cut in quarters, so as you can see, it looks a little bit more full. That's the way I like it. So that's one bag. Bagging is sometimes overlooked at how much time it takes to freeze dry and run it as a business. So when you're getting ready for those of you who do shows and things like that, it's a lot of work. I mean, as you can see, when we did the taffy, you know, cutting all that took over an hour to unwrap, cut, put it in the freeze dryer, plus you got all the cleanup from all the remnants and crumbles from the taffy. Let's see, 1.4, 1.5, so that's 3 so far. I don't think I'm going to be able to get another bag, but I'm going to say that 28 taffies gets me 3 bags of product so far.
Hey, welcome back to the Freeze-Dry Business Channel. My name is David. I'm an owner of a freeze-dry business in Idaho. If you're looking at starting a freeze-dry business or you're currently operating one and you're just wanting to know more and more about how you can grow your business, this channel's for you. Today we're going to be doing Bit O' Honey. Bit O' Honeys are actually my top 20 selling items to do as a freeze-dry business. If you want to check out that video, it's in the description below. I'm going to be showing you the unwrapping of the candies, the cutting, as well as the arrangement on the trays, and then also the freeze dryer settings that you need for this Bit O' Honey. So let's get started with this video. Alright, so let's go ahead and get the freeze dryer set up before we start arranging the candy. I'm going to show you how to put it in candy mode right here. So if you have version 5.1 or higher for your Harvester freeze dryer, it's really simple to put into candy mode. You press customize, and then you're really just going to change the dry temperature to above 130 degrees. So let's go ahead and change it to 140. That's what I like for the Bit O' Honeys. We've got it on dry mode is fast, and we don't need any extra freeze time, but that's okay to leave an initial freeze. And then extra dry time is not even going to be applied, so we save, and then we're going to start. So now that the freeze dryer is started, we're just going to shut the door and then get started on prepping the candy. Okay, so now we're ready to cut, and I just want to show you the tools that I'm using. One is just a really good knife that has a sharp blade. I use an old antique knife sharpener, but you can find one on Amazon. I've got a link in the description below. So I'm just going to sharpen up the blade a little bit, and really all we're going to do is I'm going to unwrap the Bit O' Honey, and then I'm going to cut it into 3 different sizes so we can kind of see what the variable different sizes are. So I'm going to do some in whole, do in half, and then also do in thirds. You can cut the Bit O' Honey in half, let's say, and then try to kind of squeeze it out of the wrapper. I did this similar to the taffy video, but you know, I know you can do that, but I found that it's just easier to just unwrap the Bit O' Honeys before you start cutting. So that's what we're gonna do. Now, people who like freeze-dried candy like it because, one, it's a different type of texture, so it's fun. Usually the flavor hits a little bit faster because it's crunchy, and people who can't do chewy candies, now they can. I'm just gonna keep unwrapping probably, I'd say, 30 of these individual pieces. With candy, there's really no easy way to prep it. You have to unwrap it, you have to cut it. That's what everybody is doing, and some of us, it's kind of that mindless type of work that sometimes we like. You know, you can turn on a show in the background, or maybe you like music, but you know, it's just kind of fun to kind of see what it does, but it is a lot of work, so you got to figure in those labor costs. Now you might be asking yourself, you know, what do I price bit of honeys at? You know, what's the type of like weight, how much product do you put in your bags? Well, like I've shown before, I use a Kraft Mylar bag that's food safe but short term. It's about a 5x8 bag. And what I usually do with candy is I fill it to as much as I can without impacting the candy so it's not crushed, you know. So I put as much as in there, then I weigh it, and then I basically kind of have that general weight of the amount of freeze-dried product that's in there. Then I put that weight on the labels. So I've already found that through my bags. Also, with pricing, I usually price this at between $8 to $10. Usually this is a $10 type of candy because I pay about $3.78 a pound for it, and it's just a little bit more labor intensive to do this. Okay, so now that we've got these all unwrapped, we'll cut them into thirds, halves, and leave a couple for holes. All right, so now we're gonna cut in half, and we're gonna cut in thirds. No real quick way of doing this, just find a whole piece and cut them in half. I don't know, I'm just gonna ballpark it. In terms of a process of like, you know, how many to do and things, you can figure that out. I wasn't gonna do that for this video in particular. I was just gonna show you, you know, here's the cutting, here's the arrangement, here's the different sizes for different ways you can, different sizes that you can cut, and just kind of show you a good candy to do if you're just starting out, or maybe you've started a freeze-dried business and you want to try something different. So we're going to cut these into thirds. Okay. So let's set that aside actually, so we don't get those mixed up. So these are our thirds. Yeah. January is typically a slower month for me because even though it's, you know, you've got Valentine's Day coming up, there's just not a whole lot of Valentine's Day specific, I don't know, candy, heart shape, stuff like that. So Easter is actually a really big holiday for freeze drying. Just be careful with yourself. I almost cut myself there, as you can see, but Easter's a really good holiday to do freeze-dried candy for, and Mother's Day I've seen do well, but it usually picks up for me in the summer months when people are more out and about. There's a little bit more spending money, but January through February is a little bit more tight. Okay, so there we go. So we've got our whole pieces right here, we've got thirds, and then we've got halves. All right, so let's put these on the tray. So let's go ahead and do our whole pieces. And what I'd like to do is just give enough space just to make sure if they pop too big or whatever, just, you know, for the full sizes, let's just do 5 across lengthways. And then for the halves, let's go ahead and do 6 across. And spacing is important if you care about, you know, having it look like a full piece. You know, with, you know, if they were really stuck together, then they might, when it freeze dries and it starts puffing up, it might, when you pull them apart, it might show a little bit more of a detachment type look. So that's why I like having a little bit more space with 6 across. You could probably do 7, but I'm just gonna do 6 just for this video. Okay, so you see how close I'm getting here. This is going to be plenty of room to get the thirds, and even if it's not, you know, we can obviously put more on another tray, but I'm just going to do 1 tray for all of you. I'll slide that up a little bit more, and let's do 7 for the thirds. And you know, like I said at the beginning of this video, the freeze dryer settings is at 140 degrees for about 2 hours. That's it. So those are the thirds. So we've got thirds right here, and then halves, and then we've got our holes up here. So that looks pretty good. So we've got some leftovers for the next tray. Once you put the bit of honeys in the freeze dryer, you're going to be prompted to whether you want to warm the trays or not. I don't usually do that for the bit of honeys, but for certain candies, when you want to change the texture, some candies do need to be warmed first and then you start the drying process. But for bit of honeys, you don't need to do that. Just press skip, and then you only need to freeze dry for about 2 to 2.5 hours. So we'll do that on this freeze dryer, and then we'll see what they look like after those couple hours. All right, the bit of honey is all done. Let's go ahead and take a look to see what they look like freeze dried. Alrighty, so here's some perspective on the different sizes. We've got our full, we've got our half and our third, so really not much change with the half and the thirds, but definitely the whole. So I would say, you know, to fit more product in and to make it look like there's more bite-sized pieces, I'd probably go with the thirds and the halves. And then for the wholes, you could definitely do that if you want to, throw a couple in there, but that's what they look like. So let's kind of actually see what they taste like. Bit of honeys change their texture, they do become crunchy. So this is a full-size bit of honey that's freeze-dried. Now hey, I'm not the biggest fan of bit of honeys even before as a chewy candy, but they are pretty tasty and a lot of my customers like them, so I decided to make a limited number of bags. I do believe that these are a top seller for you to add to your product lineup. Well, that's a wrap on this video for freeze drying bit of honeys. If you like the content from this video, hit the like button or hit the subscribe button and follow us and join us on this community of freeze-dried business owners. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback or if you'd like to see other things freeze-dried that could help you in your business. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you again next time.